In the era of fully enclosed Core XY 3D printers, machines tend to blend together more than ever before. One company that's really put an emphasis on advanced material printing is Cheety, something we've seen through their early adoption of heated chambers, high-temp hot ends, and bimetal nozzles. Earlier this year, Qidi reached out to let me know they were releasing a brand new fully enclosed Core XY 3D printer called the Q2 with an optional multicolor add-on, and asked if I was interested in testing it out. Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. I used their previous generation Plus for quite a bit and was curious to see what this new machine offered, so I agreed to take a look. I've had this printer for some months now, and I've put a couple hundred print hours on it, testing a wide range of materials. In this video, we'll dive into the Q2, go over its specs, what setup was like, how it's performed, and I'll share my overall thoughts based on my time with it so far. So with all that being said, and without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Let's start by running through the printer's specs. The Q2 is a fully enclosed Core XY 3D printer with a build volume of 270 by 270 by 256 millimeters. For motion, Y uses linear rods and bearings, and the X-axis uses a single linear rail. The print bed is driven up and down using 2 lead screws and 4 rods. These lead screws have their own stepper motors and independent drivers, so the printer is able to tram the bed before running a mesh. The printer's frame is made of steel with injection molded pieces connecting much of the components, and the panels are largely plastic. The Q2 has a glass front door as well as a glass top lid, and there are 2 cutouts on both sides of the panels with an acrylic window that gives you some additional viewing. The printer comes with a magnetic flex plate system for its bed using a magnetic sheet, and the build surface it ships with is dual-sided powder-coated PEI. There are tabs on the back side of the bed housing that help with aligning that plate when you go to reinstall it. Turning to the tool head, the front cover is just held in place by 2 tabs on top and some magnets, so if you squeeze while lifting up and pulling forward, it will come right off, giving you access to the components underneath. At the top is the filament runout sensor and a dual gear direct drive extruder with some beefy gears. Underneath that is the all metal hot end capable of reaching 370 Celsius that comes equipped with a 0.4 millimeter bimetal nozzle that has a hardened insert for printing with abrasive materials. It has a filament cutter on the left side, a small heatsink fan on the right, and a larger blower fan laying down underneath the toolhead that's used for your layer cooling. I couldn't easily see it by looking inside the toolhead, but there is a load cell somewhere in there that is used for all of the bed leveling. There's a chamber heater on the left side that can be used to get the chamber up to 65 Celsius, an auxiliary fan on the right hand side to help with additional cooling, and a filter at the back of the printer. Inside the top front of the printer is a small strip of LEDs, as well as a camera on the right hand side for monitoring your printer remotely. A few other things worth pointing out is a nozzle scrubber near the back of the print bed, as well as a PTFE wiper that's near the material purge chute towards the back left of the printer. This is used when loading filament or swapping out materials for a multicolor print using the Qidi Box. This is an optional add-on for the Qidi Q2 that gives you top loading, multicolor printing, filament drying, and continuous spool printing, but we'll talk more about that device or that peripheral specifically later in this video. Interfacing with the machine is done using a 3.2-inch touchscreen located at the front top center of the printer. You can tilt it up and down to adjust your viewing angle, and I found it to be bright and responsive. One complaint I've had on the last handful of Cheety machines is the location of the USB port for local printing, which has been, at least in the last 3 generations, at the back of the printer, very difficult to access. Well, I am pleased to announce that they have finally listened, and in this case for the Q2, if you are someone that wants to print without any sort of network connection, just local, there is a full-size USB port right on the back right side of the screen, front and center, easy to access. Moving to the back of the printer, there is an on-off rocker switch and power input at the bottom, along with an Ethernet port, plus a 2-pin and 8-pin expansion port. Up higher, we have the poop chute opening, as well as the exhaust port for the filter / exhaust fan, and we've got a couple of slots or openings where we can adjust the tension of the AB motors. The Q2 came packaged really nicely, and the setup process was relatively simple. This largely involves removing the tape and other packaging material, cutting some zip ties, and removing a handful of screws from the bed that are used to hold it in place during shipping. Really, the only other things you need to do is plug a cable into the back of the screen and slide that in place, attach the spool holder, as well as connect the PTFE tube. Before powering on the printer for the first time, I removed the back panel so we could take a quick glance underneath. The main things you'll find at the back of the printer is the primary controller as well as an SSR. The board has 4 built-in drivers as well as plenty of available connectivity. While it looks custom, I found a post later on that leads me to believe that this is still a board being produced by MakerBase. With the initial issues of the SSR on the Plus 4, I wanted to take a quick look at what was shipping with the Q2. What I saw looked much better than the previous design. Larger heatsink, more space between components, and a completely different coil setup. On the back panel is a breakout board for the 2 and 8-pin connector, as well as the cooling fan for the electronics. The final thing I did was flip the printer over. Not exactly a whole lot going on underneath, but you will find your 2 Z stepper motors down there, as well as a 24-volt 350-watt power supply. My only complaint with the power supply is that the fan inside of it appears to always be on even when the printer is idle, which leads me to fully powering off this machine whenever I'm not actually using it to print. Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. Whether you're starting a new project or growing something you've already built, Squarespace makes it easy to make a beautiful professional website without getting bogged down by all the technical stuff. I use Squarespace for my ModBot Army site as a central hub for everything I do. Videos, project links, sponsor info, and a way for brands or viewers to get in touch. What I really appreciate is how streamlined the whole process is. From layout to styling, everything feels intuitive, and making changes to my website is quick and painless. Squarespace also gives you built-in tools for things like analytics, SEO, and mobile optimization, so your site looks good and performs well right out of the box. No plugins, no patchwork solutions. So if you've been thinking about launching your own site, head to squarespace.com/modbot to start your free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use code MODBOT for 10% off your first purchase of website or a domain. On first boot, the screen has you select your language and then gives you nice visuals to ensure that you removed all of the necessary screws before the printer tries to move for the first time. Then the bed lifts up partially so that you can remove the final piece of packaging foam. From here, it's time for the self-checks and calibration to be ran. This starts by checking that the hot end, bed, chamber heater, and fans are all working as expected. After the self-test, the printer runs a mesh of the entire bed, and finally it runs input shaping before you're ready to start your first print. I started off by loading in some PLA and printing out the pre-sliced Benchy file that came on the printer. I then followed this up with the pre-sliced FDM test and was really happy with the results. Stringing even on the small peaks was minimal, all of the tolerance towers slid out without any issue, and all in all, it was a really solid print. From here, I was ready to slice up my own files. So I jumped over to the computer and downloaded the latest version of Qidi Studio, a fork of Bamboo Studio. While not always the case, generally when I'm testing a printer, I try to use the manufacturer's slicer or recommended slicer as much as possible. But for those wondering, at the time of editing this, there is multiple profiles available for the Q2 over in Orca Slicer. The main difference I've found with Qidi Studio is that the device page lets you browse and connect to any number of paired Qidi printers, which is pretty convenient, and there's a few additional tabs built in. Much like the last handful of printers released by Cheety, the Q2 is running Clipper firmware. And if you enter the printer's IP into your browser, you are greeted by the Fluid dashboard. From here, you can monitor your printer, start jobs, as well as make changes to the config files if that's something you feel the need to do. I didn't see it in Cheety's documentation, but I found a Reddit post and also confirmed on my own that you can SSH into the printer using the username MKS and password MakerBase. There is a warning when you do stating that any modifications or add-ons that you install that create problems or damages the machine in some way, you will be responsible for, which I think is fair. Now, how they would prove it was caused by something that was being modified versus just something faulty on the printer, I don't have the answer to, but I've seen similar verbiage used by other manufacturers as well that give you root access. As for printing, I really wanted to try a wide range of materials because this machine is really geared for printing with advanced filaments. In my video covering the nanopolymer adhesive, I tried printing with polycarbonate maybe for the first time and was really pleased with the results that I got. Certainly not as exciting looking prints, but I also used this machine to print out a bunch of adhesion test swatches in ASA, ABS, polycarbonate, PLA, PETG, and a carbon fiber material. If you saw my last video on the Polymaker Fibron PETGF15, all those prints and all that testing was done also on the Q2 printer. That material took a bit of time to dial in a good profile for, but towards the end I was getting some really clean prints. I printed out all of the parts for the Jabberwocky toolhead in ABS and ASA on this printer with a couple of small PETG inserts, and adhesion was great. While a heated chamber certainly isn't required to print with ABS or ASA, especially when you're printing kind of smaller parts like this, it makes printing them easier. One issue I ran into fairly often with the Qidi Plus 4 as well as the Q1 was an inconsistent first layer, which was especially noticeable when swapping between materials that print at different temperatures. This was caused by heat creep, which led to me having to watch the first layer go down and constantly tap the Z offset up or down to make sure that the nozzle was still at the correct height. In my testing with this printer and the wide range of different materials I've sort of thrown at it, I've only had to touch the Z offset one time, and it was a tiny bump when I was printing out the PETGF. I'm not sure if they're just using some sort of different load cell or sensor, or if maybe they optimized something in firmware, but the difference in the first layer is night and day between this machine and the last two that they've put out. The last filament that I tried out before swapping over to the Qidi Box was some 95A TPU. I watched this print about a quarter of the way before going to bed, and the next morning when I woke up and checked on the printer, it said complete, but what I found was a part that had signs of under extrusion, and clearly the printer had a clog because it did not finish printing. Thankfully, this only required me unloading the material, and there was no disassembly of the toolhead needed. For the second print, I ended up removing the top glass to get more airflow and printed it with the exact same settings, and it turned out great. Now let's talk about the Qidi Box. This is a multicolor add-on for the Q2 that lets you load up to 4 spools of filament at once. Similar to the other units like it on the market, the benefits of this are convenience of top-loading material and having 4 materials loaded at any time, multicolor printing, and in the case of the Qidi Box, it also doubles up as a filament dryer. This caps at 65 Celsius and is really nice for maintaining your filament. You have the option to print while you're drying material, but there are some warning stickers and just notes letting you know that you need to be careful about what material you're drying while printing, because if it gets too soft while it's extruding, it can lead to issues and potentially jams. Something pretty unique about this system specifically is that it is even compatible with abrasive materials, something I don't believe much of any of the other options out there allow for. When I first got the Q2, it came as a combo with the Qidi Box, but I had some initial loading issues. When I reached out to Cheety, they let me know to hold off on testing and that they were working on basically a revised version that they'd be sending to me, and that would be the one that anyone that purchases one of the Qidi Box would also be receiving. When I received the revised box, which is this one, there were some changes and add-ons to it that were evident right away. For starters, it came with a riser for the printer's lid. This solved the issue I had with the loading process, which was caused by a constrained filament path. It also came with a new wiper for the chute, along with a completely different hub than the one it originally had. The only downside of the new hub is that it takes the slot that the spool holder is on, so you can only have one or the other. So you'll very likely want to print some kind of an adapter, or you can always just put the spool on its own separate holder, separate from the printer. Once I got this installed, I started running through a handful of multicolor prints. And overall, I was really happy with the results I got. There was no filament bleed, and I didn't get a single error in any of the many loading and unloading sequences that the unit performed. Similar to any other single head multicolor printer, there are some sort of trade-offs that you should be aware of. The first comes in the form of waste each time you do a color or filament swap. There is no shortage of filament poop or filament purging, and it's just the reality of a system like this one. You can minimize it by printing multiple parts, adjusting the needed purge amount, and avoiding prints that require lots and lots of color changes. The other thing is the added time caused by these swaps. I haven't done a whole bunch of time comparisons with the other units that I've tested using similar systems, but the unloading and loading felt pretty slow. So I recorded the process from beginning to end to see how long it was actually taking. From the time it paused to cut the material to the time that it had loaded the new one and was ready to print again, it was right around 3 minutes. This seems excessive to me, and I feel like the loading and unloading process can definitely be sped up through a firmware update, but that was the case in the time frame during my testing. The last thing I ran into issues with was cardboard spools. I believe most manufacturers with similar systems to this one recommend not using cardboard spools, but honestly, I've done it fairly often, and overall I've had a pretty good experience, or at least an okay experience. However, with the Qidi Box, a cardboard spool may load okay, but it will not unload. The spool binds and requires that you lift the lid so that the spool can sort of lift up and try to retract. I reached out to Cheety about this, and they let me know that yes, indeed, the cardboard spools are not compatible. They recommend printing out the filament rings, which I did do and can confirm worked without issue. So what are my thoughts on the Qidi Q2 and the Qidi Box based on my time with them so far? The printer itself has been solid, and feels like a really nice upgrade to the previous generation plus 4. They resolved my biggest complaint or issue, which was the inconsistent first layers, and it's proven itself to work with a wide range of materials, starting at your basic PLA, going all the way up to polycarbonate and abrasives. My only real complaints are a noisy power supply fan, a bit of a squeak coming from my Y-axis, and a couple false triggers from the camera's spaghetti detective. You can adjust its sensitivity under the settings, but honestly, I'll very likely just end up disabling it. As for the box, clearly it needed some work right out of the gate, but the revised unit solved much of the initial issues I was having with the first one. The drying function is great, and the ability to work with abrasives is awesome, but there is clearly a need and room for optimization when it comes to saving time through the filament swapping process. Also, when it's loading a spool, it is pretty noisy. I let Cheety know this when I was testing out the first one and had hopes that the revised version would address that, but that does not seem to be the case. If your use case is primary spool management for the convenience of having access to multiple spools and top loading with drying and then maybe using it for filament backup or filament runout where when one spool runs out, it can tap into the next one, then my complaints aren't really going to affect your experience. Another thing to consider is the price, and at the time of recording, the Qidi Q2 is going for $499, and the combo with the box is going for $649, which makes it extremely competitive given its capabilities. I can see myself leaning on this machine as being one of my go-to printers when I'm needing to print with demanding filaments. And that's been the Qidi Q2 and Qidi Box combo. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that I was able to answer the majority of your questions. If you do have any additional questions, let me know in the comments and I will do my best to answer. And as always, if I don't know the answer to your questions, I have no problem reaching out directly to Cheety to try to get those answers for you. On that note, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great videos. We make a video just about every single week, so there's always fresh content coming your way. And if you want to support the channel further, I'll have links in the description over to our Patreon where there are some really awesome rewards. Huge thank you to all of our existing Patreon supporters. I appreciate each and every one of you for allowing me to come back every single week and spend more time doing what I love, which is making content for you all to enjoy. On that note, this has been Daniel from ModBot. I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. Peace, guys!